I don't recall exactly when I stopped counting the days. I only know that by the time I reached that ranch gate at the foot of the mountains, I had already lost track of how many roads I'd walked since Durango. My coat was held together at the shoulder with a piece of wire I'd twisted myself. A man without proper thread learns to improvise, or he learns to go cold. I took off my hat before I knocked, a habit my father taught me so early I no longer know if it came from him or if I was simply born with it. The woman who opened the door had the kind of eyes that measure a man in 5 seconds and rarely miscalculate. Behind her, in the shadow of the house, I could feel more than see her husband, seated at a table, wearing the worn patience of a man who had spent the morning arguing with numbers that refused to add up. "Sorry to trouble you, ma'am," I said. "I've been on the road since Durango. I can see from here your south fence is down in 2 places, and your water trough by the barn is cracked. You're likely losing half of what you put into that herd." She didn't say a word. She just looked at me more carefully, the way someone reconsiders a calculation they made too fast. "I know cattle," I continued. "Fences, water systems, horses. If you let me stay, I'll tend your herd. All I'm asking for is meals and a place to sleep." That was when the husband came to the door, a man who had once been broad, the years having taken width from his shoulders and given weight to his posture instead. He looked at me the way I would come to recognize in men who build things with their own hands. Slow, careful, as if every second of silence was part of the question. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Not from anywhere, originally. Been working ranches since I was 15. Working or drifting." I thought about that before answering, because the question deserved it. A little of both, honestly. He noticed the cut on my cheek, still fresh, still poorly cared for. "What happened to your face?" "Disagreement," I said. "The other man came out worse. I didn't start it, but I finished it as fast as I could." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, more like the kind of recognition that only exists between men who once stood, at some point in their lives, at someone else's door with nothing but what they carried on their backs. "What's your name?" "Callum Reed." He looked at his wife. She looked at him. I didn't know, in that moment, that I was watching a language built over 31 years of marriage. A whole conversation held in 3 seconds of shared silence. I only understood later, once I was already part of that house, that this particular look usually ended in no. They'd taken in drifters before. One had stolen a saddle. Another had disappeared overnight with money from the kitchen drawer. A tired couple's generosity has its limits, even when the heart still wants to give. I watched the no start to form on his mouth. And that was when the wind carried a sound I knew too well to mistake for anything else. Cattle in distress, pushed by something, running toward a place they didn't want to go. I didn't wait for permission. "The herd's moving," I said, already putting my hat back on. The south fence gave way. Something pushed them through. "You've got maybe 10 minutes before they reach the tree line, and after that you won't get them back." I looked at the man. "I need a horse, now." He handed me the horse without thinking. I learned later that wasn't like him at all, that he was a man who weighed every decision like it was gold. But there are moments when the body decides before the mind finishes arguing with itself. I mounted before I was even fully seated and rode out. I won't pretend it was hard. 22 minutes later, I had all 31 head back in the corral, not one lost. A border collie running at my side like he'd already decided, right then, to switch owners. When I got down and handed the reins back, the man, I still didn't know if his name was Walter, looked at me differently than he had at the door. I told him about the fence, about the trough, about a section on the east side that looked like it had been pushed out from the inside. Said I'd like to take a look come morning, if they'd let me. He looked at the cattle. He looked at me. He looked at his wife, who said nothing, because she didn't need to. I got a room at the back of the barn that night. A straw mattress, one blanket, a wash basin hanging on a nail. I told them it was more than I'd eaten the night before. I wasn't exaggerating. In the weeks that followed, I learned that some people become useful without ever making a show of it. Not because they work hard on purpose, but because they simply see what needs doing and do it. I fixed every foot of that fence, all 400 acres of it, with the same patient method my father had taught me before I lost the right to use it on my own land. I rebuilt the trough with stone and mortar I ground myself so it would survive the freeze. I found a weak spot in the barn roof before winter found it first. I wasn't entirely sure what I was trying to prove or to whom. I only knew how to work cattle in a way people noticed. The stillness. The way I could move through a herd without it even registering my presence. One day I saw Walter watching me work, and he said nothing. But later, Edna told me, without quite saying it directly, that I reminded her of the son they'd lost to a fever back in '74. She didn't tell me with words. She told me by the way she stopped mid-sentence. We ate together every night at 6, and I spoke little, because I learned early that a man who listens more than he talks usually learns more too. I asked about the land, where the water ran in spring, which pastures stayed thick and which turned thin in dry years. Walter answered, a little more each night, the way a man answers someone who might just deserve the map he's building. It was a November night, with the first real snow falling outside, that Edna set down her mending and asked plainly what had happened in Kansas. I stared at the fire longer than I meant to. My father's ranch, I finally said. Worked it since I was old enough to set a fence post. My mother died when I was 12. It was just the two of us. He passed 2 years ago and left the ranch to me. I was 19 and I didn't know enough. I borrowed against the land when the herd got sick. Thought I'd recover by spring. I didn't. The bank took it in April. I had $30 and whatever I could carry. I've been moving since, working where I can, trying to. As I stopped, started again. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I only know I still can't stop moving. Edna didn't offer me pity. She gave me a sentence I've carried since, like a tool worth keeping. You've been trying to find something worth stopping for, she said. Most people do. There's no shame in taking your time. I didn't answer. Not because I had nothing to say, but because some truths are only meant to be received in silence, without ruining them with words on top. The man named Pell came back on a cold night with 2 gunmen riding low and easy, wanting to buy, or take, depending on how Walter reacted, the land he'd already tried for twice before. The second time, with a rifle in Walter's hands to end the conversation. I was awake when the horses arrived. I put on my coat and walked to the gate without hurrying, because I'd learned, in 4 years on the road, that how you approach a problem decides half the outcome before the first word is even spoken. Pell looked down at me from the saddle, a heavy man, soft hands, the kind who pays other men to do the hard work. "I'm here to speak with Walter Marsh." "Mr. Marsh isn't available," I said. "I run the operations here. You can speak with me." "And who are you?" "Callum Reed. I've been running this ranch since September. If you've got business with the Broken Bow, you've got business with me." He measured me the way men like him measure anything, by how much resistance it offers. "I've got a fair offer for Marsh. This land isn't producing what it should. He's an old man. Winter's going to be hard. I'm just trying to help him see what's best for him." "His best interest," I said, "is you taking that offer back to Pueblo." He didn't like that. One of the riders beside him shifted in his saddle, the way men shift when they're weighing whether a fight is worth starting. "Son, I think you misunderstand your position here." "I think you misunderstand mine," I said, without raising my voice, because shouting is what men do when they aren't sure of what they're saying, and I was. "There are 3 of you. I'm the only one at this fence. But there's a man inside that house with a rifle who's been waiting a year for an excuse to use it. If anything happens to me, you'll have given him one." I let the silence do some of the work before I finished. "Do you want this land badly enough to bleed for it tonight?" He looked at me for a long while. Then he looked at the house, at Walter's shape framed against the window, rifle plainly visible even in the dark. "This conversation isn't over," he said, turning his horse. "I don't imagine it is," I said. "Come back in daylight. I'll make coffee." I stood at the gate until the sound of hooves faded completely down the road. When I turned around, Walter was standing on the porch, looking at me with an expression Edna would later tell me she hadn't seen on his face in years. That night, Walter opened the good bottle, the one kept at the back of the shelf, saved for something worth remembering. He poured 2 glasses without asking. "You held your ground," he said. "If I'd given an inch, they'd have come back worse." "I know," he said, turning the glass in his hands. "I've spent a year trying not to give in. But a year wears a man down. I'm 63 years old, 400 acres, 30 head of cattle, and I can't work this land alone the way it needs working. I knew it before winter came. Pell knew it too. That's what gives a man like him power," he said. "He waits for you to get tired. He'll come back, Callum." "I know," I said. "Then we need a plan." "We?" he said. I went quiet for a moment, feeling like I was closing in on something that deserved to be said carefully, the right way. "I lost my father's land," I said. "I was 19, made the wrong calls, and I lost it. I thought about it every day for 2 years. I don't want to watch anyone else lose theirs." The fire cracked in the hearth. Edna, in the corner, mending, stopped without looking up. Walter sat quiet for a long time. "My son is dead," he finally said. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "He'd have turned 24 in February," Walter said. "He knew this land the way you're learning to know it. The water, the pasture that thins in dry years. You've been asking the same questions he used to ask." I didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one that wouldn't sound too small for the size of that silence. He finished his whiskey, poured another, and spoke slowly, like a man setting down a weight he'd carried for months. "I've got a lawyer in Durango. Good man. I've been thinking about this since September, since you fixed that trough without being asked. Work this land with me through the winter. Come spring, if it's still working, if you still want to stay, we'll make it a partnership. 30% of the operation, not wages, ownership. 10 years from now, when I can't work it anymore, you get first right to buy the rest at a fair price. Why? I asked. Because you're good, Walter said. Because you stood at that fence with no fear and didn't do anything foolish. And because this land deserves someone who'll love it. I think you can. I looked up and didn't try to hide what my eyes were showing. I learned in that moment there's a difference between hiding the truth and simply letting it be true in front of someone. The second one is harder. It's also more honest. I'll earn it, I said. I know you will, he said. That's why I'm asking. Edna stood without a word, walked to the kitchen, came back with a third glass, because Walter had forgotten to pour his own wife a drink, something he'd apparently been doing since 1848. Some things really don't change. She sat down at the table. Well, she said, now that that's settled. And for the first time since I'd reached that gate, I smiled for real. Pell came back in January with a lawyer and a document, and that patient tone of a man who believes time always works in his favor. He found me at the fence, Walter at the barn door with the rifle, and the dog stationed at the property line with the most concentrated disapproval I've ever seen in an animal that size. The broken bow isn't for sale, I said. We're registered with the county as a partnership. Any future offer goes to our lawyer in Durango. I'll write down the name and address for you. He never came back. The winter was hard, the way Walter said it would be. 3 weeks of cold that burst pipes, kept the cattle huddled near the barn, and turned every morning into a negotiation between what needed doing and what the body still had left to give. I worked without complaint, and Walter noticed without saying so. That's how respect moved between us, mostly in silence, recognized without ever needing to be spoken aloud. By March, when the first new grass showed in the south pasture and the creek ran free again under the last of the ice, something settled over that house that hadn't been there since 1874. Not that the grief was gone. Edna still walked the hill behind the barn some nights and said things to the mountain wind that belonged only to her and the son she'd lost. That never fully leaves. Grief doesn't go away. It just learns to share the house with other things. But the other things were there now. The sound of 2 men working the barn in the morning, talking fences, pasture rotation, the price of feed in Durango. The sound of the dog making his rounds along the property line with the seriousness of an animal who'd finally found work worthy of his talents. Dinner stretching longer, the conversation covering the whole region, the seasons, plans slowly stacking on top of each other. On a warm April evening, I was sitting on the south pasture fence, watching the cattle move through new grass in the low light, when Edna climbed up and sat beside me. 61 years old, her knees complaining the whole way, but she made it anyway. We sat quiet for a while. "You wrote to someone," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd seen the envelope on the table that morning. "A girl in Durango," I said. "We knew each other before, back when I was still drifting." I gestured vaguely toward the road, toward everything behind it. "I don't know. I wrote. We'll see." She looked at the south fence line, straight and solid, every post set right. She looked at the rebuilt trough by the barn, strong enough to outlast all of us. "When Walter and I came out here," she said, "we had nothing but each other and a piece of paper saying we owned something we hadn't built yet. Most days that first year, I thought we'd made a terrible mistake." She paused. "But you know what we had? A place to stop, after years without one. A place that was ours, that we were responsible for, that needed us. That changes a person, Callum, having a place to stop." I stayed quiet. Below us, the cattle grazed in the long afternoon light. The dog made his rounds with the same devotion as always, and the mountains held snow on their high peaks against a sky already turning blue with evening. "I know," I finally said. And I did know. I'd known since September, since the first time I walked that road in second-hand boots with nothing left to lose, and found a woman who'd already opened the door before I even finished knocking. Nobody knows, in the moment it's happening, exactly where the drifting ends. Sometimes you only see it looking back, but it ends.